Hello everyone, Sam here from Mind Body Medical. Hope you guys are all well. So yesterday we spoke about the importance of using hawthorn berry to protect the heart from the COVID virus, particularly in terms of managing long-term COVID, because of the role that long-term COVID has been shown to have on really damaging the structure of the heart. And today I want to turn our attention onto the lungs. So during an acute COVID infection, in the same way that it is for a bad cold or just a standard seasonal flu, the respiratory tract takes on the primary symptom load. That's where we experience most of the symptoms in terms of the coughs, the breathlessness, the shortness of breath, the mucus congestion, etc., etc. And that's true of most respiratory infections, but it's particularly true of a COVID infection, because during an acute COVID infection, that's the primary symptom load is in the respiratory tract. So it's really, really important that during an acute infection, we are doing things, we are implementing approaches that help to really, really protect the cells of the respiratory tract from the mechanisms of the COVID virus. It helps to protect the cells of the respiratory tract from invasion via the SARS, the COVID virus. Because doing that not only helps to reduce the symptom load, it makes us feel better, it reduces the cough, it reduces the shortness of breath, it reduces the mucus buildup, it reduces how bad we feel, but it also speeds up how quickly we recover from an acute COVID infection. Because for COVID to proliferate and to progress, it needs to be able to penetrate the cells of the respiratory tract. And if we suppress that mechanism, our immune system can get the upper hand and we speed up how quickly we recover from the active infection. And that's the key thing I spoke about yesterday, and it's to re-emphasize, COVID, the mortality rate from COVID is still tiny. It's still very, very low. The bigger risk, and like I said, I'm convinced this is going to be a time bomb, it's the long-term COVID symptoms that are going to be the real big problem, because we can't get a vaccine for those. It's not something that can be fixed with a pill. In the same way that managing chronic fatigue syndrome or post-viral syndrome takes a lot of trial and error and a lot of integrative management, that's particularly true for post-COVID syndrome or long-term COVID syndrome. And in the same way that it's essential to protect the lungs during an acute infection, it's just as, if not more important, that we really, really protect and nourish the lungs long-term after an active infection. Because if we look at the primary long-term COVID symptoms that affect the lungs, it's the severe shortness of breath, the inability to catch our breath, breathlessness upon even the slightest exertion, long-term coughs, long-term mucus congestion, low blood oxygen saturation rates, all of these kinds of things that can really very quickly and very drastically reduce our quality of life. If we can no longer take the dog out for the walk, if we can no longer go for the bike ride, if we can't play with the children, with the football because we get breathlessness, because we've got no energy, because we're fatigued, because we're tired, very quickly, we're 6, 12, 18 months down the line from an active infection, which we've completely recovered from, but the COVID virus is still having a big impact upon our quality of life and our health because of this long-term COVID syndrome. And because of that, it's so important that we have these evidence-based treatments that we can turn to protect the lungs during acute infections, when we've actively got the infection, but also to support the lungs long term, in the 2, 4, 6, 8, 12 months after that acute infection, to prevent these long-term COVID symptoms. Fortunately, in the same way we spoke about hawthorn and the heart yesterday, there's a brilliant evidence-based herbal medicine that does both of those things. We can use it in acute doses during the infection, and we can use it long-term at lower doses, in the 6, 12 months after an infection to protect the heart. And that herb is called Tulsi. Some of you may have heard of Tulsi. In Ayurvedic medicine, it's one of the most important and revered herbal medicines of them all. It's called the incomparable one because of the role it plays. And it has a particular affinity for the lungs and the lung tissue. And aside from that benefit, Tulsi is also clinically proven as an antiviral, so it prevents viral proliferation. We know it's anti-inflammatory, and it's also a very powerful immune stimulant. So it's going to help against viral infections by destroying the virus and supporting our body's immune defenses against it. But since the pandemic really started in February, there's been a lot of research into herbal medicines trying to really tease apart and explore what are the active chemicals in a variety of herbs that can be active against the COVID virus. And Tulsi, there's been a lot of study into Tulsi because of its lung benefits. And what that research has showed, and this research is published in high-powered virology journals, is that Tulsi has got a chemical in it, a specific plant-based chemical that suppresses a key COVID target called RNA polymase. And RNA polymase is a cell protein, a mechanism that allows the COVID virus to reinfect new cells and proliferate. So lots of the pharmaceutical treatments are targeting this RNA polymase as a way of preventing the virus growing and proliferating in our lungs and in our respiratory cells. And Tulsi has got this chemical called scotallerin, which is a specific plant-based chemical found in high levels in Tulsi that blocks that pathway. The published evidence shows that Tulsi blocks the RNA polymase pathway, which prevents or slows down the virus's ability to invade new cells and proliferate. And if we do that, we drastically speed up how quickly we clear the infection, particularly if you add to that mechanism the fact that Tulsi is also antiviral and also immunostimulating. So when we've got an acute infection, whether it's flu or whether it's COVID, we need Tulsi to support and protect the lungs from the active virus. That's key, okay? And all this information comes from our cold, flu and COVID management protocols. So we've got these herbs already made up in our household, in my mum and dad's, our family, so that if we fall prey to a COVID infection, we can intervene immediately to protect ourselves. And all of the detailed protocols for this are in our cold and flu and COVID management protocol, which is exclusively in the Ayurvedic Mentor, which kicks off next week. So if you want to learn more about this, then check that out, because we're open to new members until the end of this week and then the doors close. So if you really want to empower yourself with an evidence-based framework for COVID, then please be sure to check that out. But aside from managing acute infections, Tulsi also has a key role to play in long-term COVID syndrome. Because if we look at the damage, the long-term damage that has been shown on MRI scans and X-rays on the lungs of people infected, we know the virus really damages the tissues of the lung, and we know that leads to long-term shortness of breath, lung dysfunction, low oxygen saturation, poor energy, a whole load of very unpleasant symptoms. And again, in the prevention and management of those long-term symptoms, Tulsi is, as far as I can see, the most important herb to turn to, because Tulsi is a lung tonic herb. It helps to support the lungs, it helps to regenerate healthy lung tissue, it increases oxygen exchange. It's clinically proven to increase oxygen exchange in humans, so we get more oxygen into the blood. So for managing the long-term COVID syndrome symptoms like breathlessness, like coughs, like mucus congestion, like breathlessness, Tulsi is manna from heaven. It's an essential part of the long-term COVID prevention plan. So it doesn't matter if we're managing an acute infection or whether we're preventing long-term COVID symptoms, Tulsi needs to inform a key component of our action plan. As a preventative, you're just sipping on a couple of cups of strong Tulsi tea a day. So if you've never had the infection and you want to support your lungs, you pucker, do a very good 3 Tulsi tea. You can buy Tulsi tea bags really easily now. Just sipping on 2, 3, 4 cups of really strong tea a day is a great preventative. If you come down with an infection, then taking 2,000 milligrams of Tulsi a day in capsule form is a very good idea. And then long-term, to prevent long-term COVID syndrome, it becomes equally important. So Tulsi on its own is great, but we can make that effectiveness significantly more effective by blending it with other lung tonic herbs. So by using 3 herbs rather than 1, we get an exponential gain. And again, that complex kind of protocol is too much detail to go into here. But the key point is that we have the ability to protect ourselves. We have the ability to support our body through a COVID infection. Very few people are going to need to be admitted into hospital with COVID. Most people are going to deal with it and manage it on their own, and they're going to recover. But we can speed up how well we recover. We can speed up how powerfully our body dominates the infection, and we can move mountains to ensure we don't come down with long COVID syndrome. That's the biggest focus of our work at the moment, is to empower people to prevent them getting long-term COVID syndrome, because it's grim and it's very hard to treat, which is why we spent the last 2 months developing these very detailed protocols. So please, if you're really looking to take control of your health, if you're really looking for a powerful evidence-based framework for what to do if you get COVID and what to do after you've got COVID and how to prevent long-term COVID syndrome, please check out our cold, flu and COVID management series. It's a 6-week series which is drawing together all of this evidence. It's from published evidence. It's the best framework we can possibly create. We've immersed ourselves in this. It's delivered exclusively by the Ayurvedic Mentor. It's a 6-week series. So if you want to learn that, if you want to benefit from that, be sure to check out the Ayurvedic Mentor. Like I said, we only open for new members until midnight on Saturday. Then we shut the doors and we kick off the series next week. So if you want to benefit from this, if you want to empower yourself with this, check out the Ayurvedic Mentor. But other than that, get some Tulsi. Get Tulsi tea, get Tulsi capsules, Fushi do it, Cytoplan do it. You can get it really easily. Get it in so you can use the preventative mechanisms now. And if you wake up tomorrow feeling unwell with COVID-S symptoms, you can start it straight away to really support and nourish your lung tissue and your lung cells. So if you know anyone that would benefit from this, please share this video widely so we can empower as many people as possible. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about how we can use a very powerful essential oil inhalation that's proven to block the mechanism that the COVID virus uses to invade respiratory cells. It's really fascinating research. So I'll be talking about that tomorrow. But other than that, have a lovely evening, and I'll see you all soon.